You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Philip Ideson, and today is Friday, September 15th, 2023.
6.
This week's Procurement 6 is brought to you by our Procurement of Services 2023 survey. We're currently undertaking a large piece of research with the goal of understanding and benchmarking how procurement organisations buy services. If you have any responsibility for buying indirect services, for example, as a CPO or a category lead, we'd love to hear from you. The survey has been built in a way that should take you no more than 5 minutes to complete. You can complete it anonymously or leave your email address for a copy of the report so you can benchmark your organisation and the way that you buy services against the rest of the AOP community. Now you can complete the survey today by going to artofprocurement.com/survey. That's artofprocurement.com/survey.
5.
In this week's Art of Procurement podcast, Kelly Barner and I were joined by Brian Salkowski, the Chief Operating Officer at Guidant Global, and Marie France, Contingent Workforce Management and Procurement Operations Expert, also at Guidant Global. In the podcast, we discussed the challenge of finding talent, whether through talent management programs, contingent workforce, or buying services via SOWs. I asked Marie if she could share some tips about how procurement can best engage with stakeholders looking to source talent here in the middle of 2023.
I think the key is around communication and being fully transparent around what are the services going to entail and what are the pain points that the organization is trying to solve is so critical in defining who are the right suppliers to handle that service and who's the right match. I think that one thing that I always stress to customers as well as business lines is that, in this state that we're in, where talent is scarce and suppliers have a choice of customers, it is so important that we have partnership from day one. And you need to be fully transparent around what's going on within your organization and create connection. Your supplier base is actually an extension of your workforce and an extension of your organization. And this time it's more critical than ever to remove the old view that we're the big fish, they're the small fish, we're going to control what they do. That mindset is going to lead to disaster for a service project. And so it's really important to be specific around the requirements, be specific around what does success look like, and determine how we can work together. I think one key is that often whenever services are stood up, you're often in discovery mode, right? And you're reliant on the suppliers to give guidance on what are the future iteration, what are the future services that have to take place in phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, et cetera. And so be open-minded around really, what does this journey look like? And recognize that it might not just be one iteration to achieve success, and continue having that dialogue with all the vendors as we go through it.
4.
This week, members of the AOP team and I were at ProcureCon Indirect East, one of the largest US procurement conferences of the year. I had the opportunity to catch up with a number of practitioners and service providers, and the topic of generative AI was never far from most people's lips. Now, most eye-opening for me was a conversation with a leading CPO who talked of recently getting the opportunity to peek behind the curtain at how a major retailer is building AI into their supply chain. He said it's with an eye-opening impact, particularly around performing procurement tasks such as sourcing and negotiation. So here's the deal. AI, whether we like it or not, is definitely coming for procurement jobs. Some jobs is going to take you like a duck to water, others not so much. But there are 2 things I think that you must have on your personal to-do list to mitigate against this. As a leader, how and where do you need to make investments now in AI technology? You need to get ahead of the game so you can take advantage of what are likely to be rapid advancements in the art of the possible over the next 6 to 12 months. And second, how are you going to approach to position your career to take advantage of this? So my approach was always to embrace the change with a feeling that if I made myself redundant, other companies would actually value my experiences in going through that process. But it could just be investing in your own development to become more digital literative. So focusing on skill sets and experiences that are less likely to be replaceable by generative AI.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
As part of the ProcureCon Indirect East event, I facilitated a panel with peers from Raymond James, Wellpath, Yum Brands, and Supply Chain Advisors. The panel was about nearshoring and reshoring indirect services, and there were 2 takeaways I wanted to share. First, that supply chain risk is something that indirect procurement teams have to care about. Now, this may sound obvious, but we've all spent a lot of time in a career talking to indirect teams that see supply chain, and therefore supply chain risk, as associated with only direct spend areas and not necessarily indirect areas of spend. Now, secondly, the panel agreed that the location of your indirect services supply chain is getting greater visibility as a point of risk within their businesses. And the answer of what to do about that may not be to entirely shift your location strategy, but to ensure that you have optionality. So providers that can provide the same services in different areas of the world, where you can quickly switch from one to another, so you're not completely reliant on one part of the world for the provision of a particular service.
2.
CEO and CFO optimism has rebounded in August based on a pair of polls recently published by Chief Executive Magazine and its sister publication, Strategic CFO 360. Now, CFOs report that they've seen the impact of cost-cutting and realignments internally to position themselves ready for growth in anticipation of the US Federal Reserve starting to cut interest rates next year. Meanwhile, CEOs are reporting that the remainder of 2023 may remain somewhat volatile, but better conditions are expected ahead. Now, interestingly, only 9% of CEOs reported that cost-cutting will be their primary strategy over the next 12 months. Rather, new product or service development comes in top at 27%, and accelerating automation and technology adoption second at 25%. Now, combined with the CFO report that major cost reduction initiatives are already underway, it does suggest that as procurement professionals, we really must be demonstrating value beyond savings at this point in the cycle to remain relevant when more favorable business conditions return.
1.
Finally today, I want to let you know of an upcoming event that you won't want to miss. Now, on September 28th, the team from KPMG will be with us live to share the results of a recent research that aimed to capture insights on procurement's current challenges, goals, and priorities, as well as the path forward from here. Be sure to register and join us live in our webinar with KPMG so you can join the conversation and pose your own questions towards our speakers. Now, you can find the registration link and all the details of a number of different events that we have coming up at artofprocurement.com/calendar. That's artofprocurement.com/calendar.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.